Okay, so um, we've got a lot here on vaccine injury claims. And I know just looking at all this stuff, it can feel kind of overwhelming. Like where do you even begin? So we're going to try to break it down a little bit today. And specifically, we're going to focus on the COVID-19 vaccine and some of the reasons why people might hesitate to file a claim, even if they think they might have been injured. We want to look at these concerns and really try to understand where they're coming from. And we're going to do that by looking closely at all this research you've given us. And to help us unpack all of this, we have an expert with us today, someone who can help us understand all the legal and social stuff that comes with this topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's totally natural to feel a little hesitant about taking legal action, especially when you're talking about something so personal, like your health.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the first things that jumps out from the research is just the fear of the legal process itself. Lawsuits can seem like these big, scary things.
Oh, absolutely. It can be really daunting to think about navigating the legal system, especially when you're going up against these big institutions and having to gather evidence, maybe even appear in court. It's a lot to deal with on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Especially if you're already dealing with health issues.
Right. And it's easy to feel like if you add a legal battle on top of everything else, it's just going to create more stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting in this research is it also emphasizes that the legal system is designed to help people like you seek justice. And there are actually resources out there to help you navigate the process.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. You're not alone in this. There are legal professionals out there who specialize in these kinds of cases, and they understand how overwhelming it can feel, and they can guide you through every step of the way and make sure that your voice is heard.
Okay, so that's reassuring to hear. But then there's also this undercurrent of distrust that the research highlights, and it's directed toward both the medical and legal systems. And I think this idea of a harmonious opinion among some doctors regarding vaccine safety, that really stood out to me. It can make people feel like their individual concerns aren't being taken seriously.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we feel like there's a lack of independent opinions or that there's a bias towards these big institutions, it's easy to see how that can lead to distrust. And then you start hearing stories from people people in your community who've had negative experiences, and that just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, it's like those personal stories. Even if they're not representative of the big picture, they can really hit home and shape how we see things.
Exactly. And it's not just about the systems themselves. There's also this social pressure that comes into play. This research talks about how there's this expectation that everyone should view vaccines positively. And that can make people hesitant to even admit that they're having second thoughts or concerns, let alone, actually speak up about it.
Yeah, it's like there's this fear of being labeled as anti-vaccine, even if you have legitimate concerns based on your own experience, which is tough.
It creates this real internal conflict because you might be dealing with health issues, but you're also worried about what other people will think and the potential backlash for speaking out. And it's important to remember that seeking legal recourse isn't about taking sides in some big debate about vaccines. It's about protecting your own individual rights and your well-being.
Right. It's about advocating for yourself and your health, no matter what anyone else thinks. But on a more practical level, the research also points out that a lot of people might not even know what their legal options are when it comes to vaccine injury claims.
That's a really good point. It's not something that people talk about a lot. So a lot of people just aren't aware of things like the law of compensation for vaccine victims, which can actually be a less intimidating way to seek compensation compared to a full-blown lawsuit.
So in this case, knowledge is power.
Absolutely. Understanding your rights and your options is crucial. And that's where talking to a lawyer can be so helpful. A lawyer who specializes in these kinds of cases can look at your situation and see if you have a strong claim. And they can explain the process and make sure your rights are protected.
Okay, that makes sense. So having that expert guidance is really important. But here's where things get really interesting to me. The research also talks about how filing a claim can actually have benefits for society as a whole.
Yeah.
And not just for the individual.
Right. It's not just about getting justice for yourself. It's about potentially contributing to a larger conversation about vaccine safety and how we can better protect everyone.
So how does that work? Can you give me an example?
Sure. So one way is that legal action can raise public awareness. When these issues are brought to light, it can encourage more transparency and scrutiny of the safety protocols surrounding vaccines. And that can ultimately lead to better healthcare policies and practices that benefit everyone.
So it's not just about individual cases. It's about potentially influencing systemic change. within the healthcare system.
Exactly. By speaking up and seeking justice, individuals can actually play a role in creating a safer and more informed healthcare system for everyone. Their experiences can provide valuable data and insights that can be used to inform research and improve regulations, and ultimately protect others from potential harm.
Wow, that's a really powerful thought. So even if an individual case doesn't win in court, it can still have a positive impact by contributing to a larger conversation about vaccine safety.
Absolutely. And that collective awareness and action can be incredibly powerful in driving real change. You know, something else that's interesting is that there's been a growing recognition in the medical literature of potential side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine.
Oh, really? So that means the scientific community is starting to acknowledge and study these potential adverse reactions.
Exactly. As more data is collected and analyzed, our understanding of the potential side effects is evolving. And this growing body of evidence can be really helpful for people who are trying to support their claims.
So it's like science is catching up to the experiences of people who believe they've been harmed.
I think that's a good way to put it. And it's definitely a positive development that
Well,
there's this increasing awareness and validation within the medical community. And the research suggests that legal claims can actually contribute to this by encouraging a broader public discourse and bringing these issues to the attention of the scientific community.
that's fascinating. So how does that work exactly?
Well, when these issues are brought to the forefront through legal action, it can lead to a more in-depth examination of vaccine safety and a more proactive approach to addressing potential harms. It can stimulate research into the long-term effects of vaccines and improve our ability to diagnose and treat adverse reactions. And it could even lead to the development of new treatments and therapies.
So it's like these claims can act as a catalyst for change.
Exactly. They can push for greater accountability and a more comprehensive understanding of the risks associated with vaccines.
And that ultimately leads to improvements in how we monitor vaccine safety and how we diagnose and treat adverse reactions
Yeah.
and how we support people who have been injured.
Right. It's not just about individual redress. It's about contributing to a collective effort to improve healthcare practices and protect public health.
Exactly.
And while legal action should never be taken lightly, it can be a really powerful tool for promoting transparency and accountability and driving progress in the field of vaccine safety.
So you mentioned earlier this law of compensation for vaccine victims and that it could be a less intimidating option than a full-blown lawsuit. And the research seems to suggest that it's a more straightforward process. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It was designed specifically to help people who have experienced adverse effects from vaccines. And it's a no-fault system, so you don't have to prove that anyone was negligent or that the healthcare provider or vaccine manufacturer did anything wrong.
So that takes some of the pressure off of having to prove that a mistake was made.
Exactly. It's really about getting financial support to those who need it. Regardless of how it happened, it's meant to be more accessible and less adversarial.
That makes sense. It sounds like a more compassionate approach. It acknowledges that these injuries can happen, even when everyone's following the rules. But the research also mentions some limitations with this law.
Right. There are certain criteria you have to meet to be eligible, and the amount of compensation might not be as high as what you might get through a traditional lawsuit. It really depends on the specifics of your situation.
So it's still important to talk to a lawyer to see if this is the right path for you.
Definitely. A lawyer who specializes in vaccine injury claims can evaluate your case and explain how the law works and help you decide what to do.
Okay, so having that expert guidance is really key. And speaking of experts, the research also mentions that legal claims can actually encourage more research into vaccine injuries and help scientists understand these issues better.
That's right. These claims can bring more attention to the issue and lead to more research into the long-term effects of vaccines and potentially the development of new treatments and therapies.
So it's not just about individuals getting compensation. It's about contributing to a broader understanding of how vaccines impact people and improving healthcare for everyone.
Exactly. It's about pushing for a more comprehensive approach to vaccine safety, one that recognizes that there are potential risks and invests in research to address those risks and provide support for those who have been harmed.
Which ultimately benefits us all, right?
Absolutely. By working towards a system that prioritizes individual well-being and public health, we can ensure that vaccines remain a valuable tool for protecting us, while also taking care of those who experience adverse effects.
I think that's a great note to end on. It's been really insightful talking to you today. And I think it's clear that this whole issue of vaccine injury claims is incredibly complex, both legally and emotionally.
It is. But hopefully this deep dive has given you some helpful information and help you feel more empowered to make informed decisions about your health.
I think so. And remember, everyone, seeking legal advice doesn't necessarily mean you have to file a lawsuit. It's about getting the information you need, understanding what your options are, and making the best choice for your own situation.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, and understanding your rights is the first step in taking control of your own health journey.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. And to our listeners, remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources and support systems out there, so don't hesitate to reach out for help if you need it.